Welcome to DSQL. My name is Dinesh Priyankara, Data Platform MVP and Business Intelligence Architect. There's a brand new version of Azure Data Factory, Data Factory version 2. Let's talk about it and let's see how we can use it for automating data transfer between on-premise SQL Server database and Azure Data Lake store. Here are the things I have added to this video. First, let's try to understand the problem solved by Azure Data Factory, and then I'll take you through a set of slides that explain Azure Data Factory, like what is it, key concepts, and how it works. Then I have two demonstrations. I'll show you the way of creating Azure Data Factory account. That's the first demo. And then let's see how we can use Azure Data Factory for automating the data transfer between on-premise SQL Server database and Azure Data Lake. As a part of it, I'll show you the way of installing and configuring Integration Runtime and setting up permission on Azure Data Lake store using Azure App Registration. Why should I use Azure Data Factory? Everything has been modernized. We have been implementing data movement solutions, data processing or transformation solutions, and we call them as ETL solutions. At early stages, we ignored unstructured data or data that is not much comfortable for us. But once we started working with big data, or once we started working with unstructured data and data streams, for certain scenarios, we started implementing ETL solutions as ELT solutions. Not only that, we started working with cloud environment too. If you think about a big data process or data movement in a data warehouse projects, we might start with an on-premise database, which is an OLTP database, and move data to the cloud or to a data warehouse hosted in the cloud. And we will do some transformations while moving data from on-premise database to cloud data warehouse. If this implementation is based on Microsoft platform, on-premise database is a SQL database and cloud data warehouse is an Azure data warehouse. If you use other Azure services for this implementation, we may send required data to Azure Data Lake store and then use either Azure Data Lake Analytics or HD Insight for transforming them. And once transformed data can be sent to Azure SQL Data Warehouse. This is not the only way of doing this, but this may be the way of most modern solutions. If we try to automate the whole process, we have to work with many components and services, and it's a lot of work. This is where Azure Data Factory comes in. Azure Data Factory helps us to automate this process and not exactly, but get SSIS similar implementation done in cloud for implementing ETL and ELT solutions. Let's talk about Azure Data Factory, specifically the new version, Azure Data Factory version 2. What is Azure Data Factory? It's a cloud-based integration service that supports us for implementing and automating ETL and ELT solutions. It is an Azure service and it allows us to create a data-driven workflow for configuring our data movements and transformations. It's very similar to SSIS. Older version of Azure Data Factory had no rich interface like SSIS, but version 2 has an environment, we call it as Author tab, that has a canvas just like the control flow in SSIS. So we can create a workflow setting up with various components available for ETL and ELT solutions. And we can schedule it just like the way we have been doing it with SSIS and SQL Agent. We do support somewhere around 65 source types. They can be either in cloud or on-premise, and Microsoft will continuously add more and more source types. In order to communicate with sources, a bridge has to be used, and we have something new on that which is called Integration Runtime. Let's talk about Integration Runtime with a different slide. How we do transformation using Azure Data Factory? There are many options. As per our requirements, we can use Hive configuring with HD Insight, or we can use USQL configuring with Azure Data Lake Analytics. Likewise, there are many ways of getting transformations done. Let's try to understand some of the key concepts related to Azure Data Factory. Azure Data Factory takes your workflow configured and encapsulates it into something called pipeline. Think of it as something similar to SSIS control flow. It includes all activities you need to perform, and they can be configured to get executed either in sequential way or in parallel. In a single data factory, you can have one or more pipelines. An activity is a task you need to perform as a part of your workflow or within your pipeline. There are three activity types: data movement activities, data transformation activities, and control activities. Let me give you some example on these three. Copy data is an example for data movement activity. And if you want to transform some data using Hive script or USQL script, it is a data transformation activity. If you want to invoke another pipeline or get activities executed based on another condition, then you have to use control activities. If you go into Author tab, you can see all these types of activities, and then you can use them for configuring your pipeline. Dataset is a data structure. When an activity accesses data, it creates a reference to the data which is treated as a data set. An activity can take 0 or more input data sets and produce one or more output data sets. Link service is a connection to an external source. You can think it as a connection string. When you need to access a data container, either as a source or target, for an example, if you need to get some data from SQL Server, then it is a source. And if you want to write some data to Data Lake store, it is the target. For creating this source and target, you need to have link services for both. Not only that, when you use compute resource such as HD Insight or Data Lake Analytics for processing data or transforming data, you need the link service to compute resource as well. These are the main things you should know when you work with Azure Data Factory. Let's see what is Integration Runtime. This provides the facility to make communication between different network environments. Think it as a bridge that sits between two different networks. For an example, if Data Factory wants to communicate with on-premise SQL Server, it needs this bridge to communicate. In other words, it needs Integration Runtime to communicate. It facilitates different integration capabilities. When you need to transfer data between public network and private network, for an example, data transfer between Data Lake store, which is public, and on-premise SQL Server database, which is private, then its data movement capabilities are used. With this, it provides supports for connectors, format conversion, column mapping, and scalable data transfer. Its activity dispatch capabilities are used when a compute service such as Azure HD Insight or SQL Server used for transformation activities. When a SQL Server Integration Services package or SSIS package needs to be executed in a managed Azure compute environment, then its SSIS package execution capabilities are used. There are three types of integration runtimes: Azure, self-hosted, and Azure SSIS. Azure type can be used only in public network, and it can be used with data movement and activity dispatch capabilities. Self-hosted is used with both public and private networks, and it can be used with data movement and activity dispatch capabilities. The last one, Azure SSIS type, it is also available for both public and private networks, but only with SSIS package execution capabilities. Let's take an example and see how all of these discussed items are used in Azure Data Factory. Assume that you have a SQL Server on-premise database and you want to extract some data from this database, do some transformations, and then transfer this transform data to Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So you'll be implementing something like this: extraction, transformations, and then again the extraction based on transform data and pass into Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So if I want to automate this process using Azure Data Factory, I need to start this with a pipeline. And since I'm going to access on-premise SQL Server database, I need to create a link service or connection to my on-premise SQL Server database. Then I can create an activity for copying data or extracting data from my SQL Server database into Azure Data Factory environment. This needs integration runtime, and since this is a private network, I have to use self-hosted integration runtime. This creates a reference to data we extract, so which means it takes the data as a data set and then it continues with the transformation. So assume that for the transformation we use HD Insight or we use Azure Data Lake Analytics. So in that case, it has to set as an activity too. So this activity is a transformation type activity. And I have to create a link service for that because I'll be using compute resource and the link service is the reference for that compute resource. And I need integration runtime. This is going to be a Azure type integration runtime because it's in public network. And this will create a dataset too because this produces an output. So which means this produces a dataset. And then it transform data to Azure Data Warehouse. I need a link service for that too. And this transfer process is an activity. And I need integration runtime, but this is not a self-hosted integration runtime. It's in Azure, so which means it's a public network. I have to use Azure integration runtime. This also has a data set that represents the data that will be transferred to Azure SQL Data Warehouse. So this is how we use Azure Data Factory for implementing our ETL or ELT solution. Demo time. Let me show you the way of creating Azure Data Factory account, and then I'll show you the way of transferring data from on-premise SQL database to Azure Data Lake store. With that, I'll show you the way of installing integration runtime, and I'll show you how to set up or how to set permission on Azure Data Lake store using app registration. Okay, I have logged into my Azure portal. Let me open Data Factory's blade. Now I have already added Data Factories to my favorite. If you have not added, what you have to do is go to more services and then search for Data Factory and you can get it open. So let me click on this and get it open, and this is how you add a new Data Factory account. Click on add and then you can supply the name. So let me name it as DNSQL Azure Data Factory 01. Let me name it like that, and then the subscription, and then the resource group. Let me use one of the existing resource groups, and we are going to use the latest version. If you expand this drop down, you can see the previous version and the latest version. So let's continue with the latest version, and I can select the location. It is limited to certain set of regions, so we have to pick one of the regions that have been given. That's all. Click on create, and then the Azure portal will create a new data factory for us. It has been created. Let me click on refresh for seeing it. I can see my data factory account. Let me click on it. If you have used the previous version, when you click on it, you will be seeing a set of tiles here, but when you create one with V2, you will be seeing only 2 tiles. What we have to do is we have to click on this auth and monitor for continuing with this data factory account. But before that, let me tell you what I'm going to do with my demo. So I'll be accessing my SQL Server, which has been installed in my machine, and getting data from AdventureWorks database, let's say from product table, and then I'll be taking them to Azure Data Lake store. So let me show you the table I'm going to access. This is the production.product table, and it has somewhere around 504 records. And let me show you the column called modified date. You can see there are 2 different dates. One is 23rd of January, other one is 24th of January. So what I want is when this pipeline is getting executed, based on the date, it should pick records. So today is 24th, so it should take only records that have been marked as 24th. For example, these 4 records, product ID 1, 2, 3, 4, modified date of those 4 records are 23rd of January. So those 4 records should not be picked. But 5th record, which is product ID 316, it should be picked because the modified date is 24th. So this is what we are going to extract using Azure Data Lake pipeline. In addition to that, we need to make sure that Azure Data Factory can write data to data lakes too. So let me open this tab. This is the data lake store. Let me close this. I have two data lake stores, and this is the one I'm going to use. And if I click on Data Explorer, you can see I don't have any folders created. So I want to make sure that my pipeline can access the root of this data lake store, and it can write data which will be extracted from production.product table. Now, in order to make sure that Data Factory account can access this, we need to give permission. So this is how we have to give permission. We need to create an app registration, and when you create the app registration, you'll be having the app registration ID and the secret key. We have to use ID and secret key with the pipeline, and then we need to make sure that this app registration has enough permission for accessing this data lake store. Right, so let's see how we can create an app registration. I have already created, but let me show you the way of creating it. If I click on app registration, and I can see all app registration that have been done. So this is the one I'm going to use, but let me show you how to create a new one. You can click on new application registration and give a name, something like SQL demo test 2. That's going to be my name, and application type is web app API, and we need to have a URL. So let me just say that it is SQL test02.com, and then I can click on create. Oops. Then I can click on create and get this registration or app registration created. Let me create it. I'm not going to use it, but let me create it. So once it is created, we need to make sure we generate a key. So that is the key we are going to use for setting up the pipeline. Let me click on this, and this is what we just created. You can see application ID. Sometimes we call this as service principal ID. I can get it copied. If I click on this, I can get it copied, and if I click on settings and then keys, this blade allows me to create a key for my app registration. So I can give a name for this, for example main, and I can say duration is 1 year, and if I click on save, it will generate a key for me. So once we click on save, it generates a value for us. That's going to be the key, and you have to remember that you will not be able to see this key again once this blade is closed. So you need to make sure that you have copied this key and keep it for accessing anything using this app registration. For example, if I close this and go back with keys, I'll be seeing something like this. You can see the value is marked as hidden, which means we will not be able to get the value again. Okay, let me close this, and let me click on the one I'm going to access, one I'm going to use. So that is the SQL demo app. If I click on this, I have the application ID. Let me copy that. That's what I'm going to use with my pipeline. Not only that, if I go for settings and keys, I can see the main key which has been set with this expiry date. I have already copied this value, so I have the application ID and the password or the key. That's what I'm going to use with my Azure Data Lake store. Now let me go back to my Data Lake store and set this app registration with my Data Lake store account. So this is how you set it. You go to Data Explorer, and I'm going to make sure that my app registration can access the entire Data Lake store. So it is not going to be limited to 1 or 2 folders. So in this case, I need to make sure I'm in the root, and then I can click on access. Then it opens a blade where I can which I can use for setting up permission. You can see I have already set permission for my app. This is the app I had created, and it has permission for reading, writing, and executing whatever the processes I want against this Data Lake store. But how do we do it? Now if I have not done this before, I have to click on add, and then click on the configure required setting, and then I can make a search. When I make a search, I can pick it. For example, let's say I'm going to select this and select, and then I can say read, write, execute all the permissions, and not only for the current folder, all the folders, and access permission entry and default permission entry. And then you can click OK and again OK. So that will make sure that app registration has access to Data Lake store account. So since I have already done it, let me close without saving, and I know that my app registration has read, write, execute permission. Okay, let me go back to my Data Factory account. Now this is how we start. We have to click on auth and monitor. This opens a new tab, and this is where we author, or this is where we create pipelines. Now there are two ways of creating pipelines. One is I can click on this button and open author tab and create it manually. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to have another video that explains how to create these pipelines manually. With this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a one using copy data wizard. So let me click on copy data. It starts a wizard, and I'm going to name this as copy pipeline on-prem SQL DB to Azure Data Lake store. That's going to be the name, and I want to schedule it. For example, every day it should access my SQL Server, which is installed in my machine, extract production.product data, and put it to my Data Lake store. I can set up a start time. So let me say 5:30 a.m. UTC, and click on next. You can see recurring pattern can be set as daily, weekly, hourly, minute, but let me set it as daily. Click on next. What is the source? So I have to select SQL Server as the source. Click on next. Then this is going to be the name for my source or the link service. So I'm going to say it is Dinesh PC. Integration runtime, we discussed about it. We know that there are three types of integration runtimes, and in this case, since we are going to access a private network, which is my machine, we need to make sure self-hosted integration runtime is installed. But it is very easy now. If I expand it, I should see integration runtime if I have already installed and configured based on this Azure Data Factory account, but I don't have anything. We just created it. So in that case, I can click on create integration runtime. I'm going to name it as integration runtime self-hosted Dinesh PC. Let me click on create. Now this gives us a window which has two links. One is launch express setup on this computer. Other one is manual setup. So if I want to install it manually, I can click on this and get it downloaded and installed. Then later I can add these keys. Or else easiest way is click on this launch express setup on this computer, and it will download the related file, and then I can click on it for getting it installed. So this starts the installation. It goes through certain set of stages. You can see loading configuration, then it downloads the relevant software component, and then it will install it in my machine, and finally it will configure it with relevant keys. We don't need to do anything manually. So once this is done, I'll be able to use this integration runtime self-hosted with my pipeline. Let it complete. So as you see, installation has been completed, and there are no errors, which mean it has been successfully completed. I can close it, and I can notice that my integration runtime self-hosted Dinesh PC has been automatically selected as the integration runtime. So this is how you install integration runtime or the self-hosted integration runtime in your machine. Okay, now I have to tell this guy what is the SQL Server it should access and what is the database it should access and the SQL permission. So I'm going to set my server name and database name. This is my server name. This is my database name, and I'll be using an account called Dinesh for accessing SQL Server database, and this is the password, and let me click on next to continue with the wizard. So once we connected with the source, it lists out all available tables. I can pick the table and I can analyze the schema. I can have a look on the data. So let me pick the table which is called production.product. This is the one I'm going to extract, or I'm going to use, and I'll be able to see sample record set. So these are the columns available. I can see a set of records. Everything looks okay for me, so let me click on next. Now this window allows us to set the filter. So you have seen the table structure. It has a column called modified date. So what I want is I want to access only records that have been modified for the day related to this pipeline execution. So let me select the column as modified date. So I'm simply telling this guy saying use modified date to identify change records or new records. Click on next. What is the target? I want to make sure that my data is going to be placed in Azure Data Lake store, and click on next. We need to connect with our Azure Data Lake store. So I'm going to name this as SQL Azure Data Lake store, and it's going to be a public network, so we don't need to worry about installing self-hosted integration runtime. I can simply access my Azure Data Lake store using my subscription. So let me select the subscription I have, and then the Data Lake store. This is where we enter app registration ID and password. So tenant ID has been automatically picked, and then the server's principal ID. This is my server principal ID. Remember, this is the application ID of the app registration we created. Then the key or the password, the one we created with that application or app registration. Here's the key. Click on next. So then we come to an interface where we have to select the location for these files. I can click on browse and pick a folder if folders have been created in my Azure Data Lake store. If I go to this tab, you can see I don't have any folders, so which means I have to use the root. So let me go back to this and cancel this, and I can simply specify the slash, but I'm not going to just place all these folders to the root. I'm going to get folders created based on the date. So I'll be creating a folder with the year, and inside the year folder I'll be creating a folder for the month, and then inside that I'll be creating another folder for the date. So how do you do it? As you see, the information has been given with this. I can simply select this part, copy and paste. So this will make sure that files are placed to the folder that is related to the current date. So I don't want to set anything else, and this is going to be the file name. I want to make sure that folder related to year is always with 4 digits, and then 2 digits for month, and then again 2 digits for date. Let me click on next, and everything looks okay. It's going to be a comma separated file. I don't want to change any other settings. Okay, click on next. And how to handle errors, I can say skip all incompatible rows. I want to make sure this completes successfully. Click on next, and I have the summary. I can click on next to getting it configured and getting it triggered. Now it is getting executed. I can click on monitor and see how it is being executed. You can see one record has been added to this window. So this indicates that it is getting executed. I can click on refresh and see whether it has been completed. No, not yet. Okay, it is completed. I can go to author tab and see how it has been created. But before that, let me go and see my Azure Data Lake store. If I go to my Azure Data Lake store, I can see a folder that it has been named as 2018, which means the folder has been automatically created by Azure Data Factory pipeline. Let me go into this. I can see a folder for the month, which is January, and then I can see another folder for the current date. If I go into this folder, I can see the file, I can click on it, and it has extracted certain set of records. Now you can see it has the first record is 216, that's the ID, and then 319 is the second ID. So why it has not extracted all records? Because it has extracted records related to 24th of January only. That's why we don't see all records. So we don't need to worry about filtering it for current record and writing expressions or writing where clauses for getting it filtered. Azure Data Factory has handled it. You remember that all we had to do is specify the column that has to be used with this execution. So Azure Data Factory will use that column for filtering records. Not only that, folders will be automatically created based on the records extracted based on the date this pipeline is getting executed. Now let me go back to Azure Data Factory and let me click on author tab. I can see one pipeline. Let me click on this pipeline. You can see copy activity has been added. If I click on this, I can see various properties. So we will talk about all of these things with the next video, and we'll see how we can do all of these things manually without going through wizard like that. But simply you can configure your ETL operation using copy data if it is just copying from your source to whatever the target. Okay, we have done with our demo. So you have seen how to create an Azure Data Factory account and use it for extracting data from on-premise SQL database and place extracted data into Azure Data Lake store. In addition to that, you saw how to set up integration runtime, and you saw how to set up permission using app registration. Okay, that's all we have. We'll discuss more on Azure Data Factory with future videos. Thanks for watching.